February 9, 1945. Manila, Philippines. A 21-year-old janitor from San Antonio, Texas, is crouched behind a pile of rubble, watching 82 Japanese soldiers fortify their positions across a burning street. He has a BAR, a Browning automatic rifle, 20 rounds in the magazine, maybe 3 grenades left, and absolutely no reason to believe he's going to survive the next 2 hours. His sergeant is dead. His squad is pinned down. The Japanese have turned every building into a fortress, and they're not retreating. They're fighting to the death, and they're taking as many Americans with them as possible. This janitor, this kid who grew up in poverty, who lost both parents before he was 10 years old, who the Army almost didn't accept because he looked too frail, is about to do something that will be talked about for decades. But here's what makes this story absolutely insane. Nobody knows about it. Ask 100 people to name a World War II hero, and you'll hear Audie Murphy, Desmond Doss, maybe Alvin York, all incredible men, all deserving of their fame. But ask those same 100 people about Cleto Rodriguez, and maybe one will recognize the name. This is the story of how an orphaned Mexican-American kid who worked as a janitor became one of the most lethal soldiers in American military history. How he killed more enemy combatants in a single engagement than most soldiers see in an entire war. How he earned the Medal of Honor for an action so violent, so sustained, and so absolutely desperate that even today, military historians struggle to explain how he survived it, and how, after the war, he went right back to being a janitor, like nothing had happened. This is a true story. Every detail is documented. Every number is verified, and it's time someone told it properly. Act 1. The Boy Who Had Nothing. Cleto Laverne Rodriguez was born on April 26, 1923, in San Marcos, Texas, to Mexican immigrant parents. His father worked in construction. His mother cleaned houses. They were poor, the kind of poor where you don't eat some days, where you wear the same clothes until they fall apart, where the idea of owning anything new is a fantasy. When Cleto was 9 years old, his father died. Heart attack, sudden, no warning. The family had no savings, no insurance, nothing. His mother tried to hold things together. She took extra cleaning jobs, worked herself to exhaustion. It wasn't enough. A year later, she was gone too. The official cause was pneumonia, but everyone knew it was really poverty and exhaustion that killed her. Cleto and his younger siblings were split up, sent to live with different relatives who could barely afford to feed their own children, let alone take in orphans. Cleto ended up with an aunt in San Antonio. She gave him a place to sleep and occasional meals, but made it clear he needed to earn his keep. At 11 years old, Cleto started working. He did whatever he could find: swept floors at a grocery store, hauled trash, picked cotton in the summers. By the time he was 15, he'd dropped out of school entirely and was working full-time as a janitor at a factory. The other kids in the neighborhood called him Flaco, skinny. He was small, maybe 5'6" on a good day, couldn't have weighed more than 130 pounds. He had a quiet demeanor, didn't talk much, kept his head down. Nobody expected anything from Cleto Rodriguez. He was just another poor Mexican kid in San Antonio, destined for a life of hard labor and poverty. And then, December 7, 1941, happened. When Pearl Harbor was attacked, Cleto was 18 years old, still working as a janitor, still living with his aunt, still invisible to the world. But something changed in him that day. Years later, in one of the few interviews he ever gave, Cleto said, "I figured if my country was going to war, I should go too." Simple as that. He tried to enlist in December 1941. The recruiting officer took one look at him, underweight, undereducated, obviously poor, and was ready to reject him on the spot. But it was wartime. The Army needed bodies. They took him. Cleto Rodriguez was assigned to the 148th Infantry Regiment, part of the 37th Infantry Division, a National Guard unit from Ohio that was being rapidly expanded and trained for deployment to the Pacific. Basic training was hard. Everything was hard. The physical standards, the discipline, the constant yelling from drill instructors who looked at Mexican recruits like Cleto and saw problems waiting to happen. But Cleto had one advantage that nobody else in his unit could match. He'd been fighting his entire life, not in combat, fighting to survive, fighting to eat, fighting to have a place to sleep. The Army was hard, but it wasn't harder than being a 9-year-old orphan in Depression-era Texas. He passed basic training, not at the top of his class. He wasn't officer material, wasn't going to be a sergeant, but he passed. He could shoot. He could follow orders. He showed up. In 1942, the 37th Division was shipped to the Pacific, first to Fiji for more training, then to the Solomon Islands, then New Georgia, Bougainville, a series of brutal island campaigns where men died from Japanese bullets, disease, heat, and pure exhaustion. Cleto fought through all of it. He was assigned to B Company, 148th Infantry Regiment. He carried a BAR, the Browning automatic rifle, a 20-pound beast of a weapon that fired .30-06 rounds and could put down sustained automatic fire. The BAR was not an easy weapon to use. It was heavy, it kicked like a mule, and it required strength and stamina to carry and operate effectively in combat. But Cleto was good with it. Really good. His company commander noted in a 1943 evaluation, "Rodriguez is a reliable soldier. Quiet, follows orders, effective with the BAR, no disciplinary issues. Reliable. That was the word. Not exceptional. Not heroic. Reliable." Cleto spent 3 years in the Pacific, watching friends die, watching good men get torn apart by bullets and bombs and disease. He was wounded twice, shrapnel wounds, nothing serious enough to send him home. By early 1945, he'd been promoted to Private First Class. Still not a leader, still not anyone special, just a soldier who did his job and stayed alive. And then the 37th Division received orders for the invasion of Manila. Act 2. The City of Death. Manila in 1945 was hell on earth. The Japanese garrison commander, Admiral Iwabuchi Sanji, had decided that rather than evacuate or defend the city strategically, he would turn Manila into a fortress and fight to the last man. Worse, he ordered his troops to treat the Filipino civilian population as enemies. What followed was one of the worst atrocities of World War II, the Manila Massacre. Japanese troops murdered an estimated 100,000 Filipino civilians in the weeks before and during the American liberation. When the 37th Division entered Manila on February 4, 1945, they weren't walking into a battlefield. They were walking into an urban nightmare. Every building was potentially fortified. Every window could hide a sniper. The Japanese had set up machine gun nests, artillery positions, and booby traps throughout the city. They weren't trying to win. They were trying to kill as many Americans as possible before dying themselves. Urban combat is the worst kind of fighting. No clear lines, no safe positions. Every room you enter could be your last. And the Japanese defenders in Manila were fanatics who refused to surrender. Cleto's company, B Company of the 148th Infantry, was assigned to clear the Paco district, a densely built residential and commercial area that the Japanese had turned into a killing ground. For 5 days, B Company fought building by building, room by room. The casualties were horrific. Men Cleto had served with for 3 years were dying in rooms and hallways, killed by hidden machine guns or grenades rolled down staircases. By February 9th, B Company was at half strength, exhausted, running low on ammunition, and they were about to hit the worst position yet. The Japanese had fortified 3 connected buildings on a street corner, solid concrete structures with overlapping fields of fire. They'd turned them into a strongpoint that completely blocked the American advance. B Company's commanding officer ordered an assault. They had to take those buildings or the entire advance would stall. Cleto's squad, 9 men under Sergeant John Reese was assigned to lead the attack. They moved out at 1900 hours, 7 p.m. It was already getting dark, which made everything more dangerous and chaotic. The assault started badly. The moment they moved into the open, Japanese machine guns opened up from multiple positions. 2 men went down in the first 30 seconds. The survivors scrambled for cover behind rubble and a knocked-out Japanese tank. They were pinned, couldn't advance, couldn't retreat without taking more casualties. Sergeant Reese tried to organize a flanking movement. A Japanese grenade landed next to him. He died instantly. The squad was now leaderless, pinned down by at least 4 machine gun positions, taking fire from snipers in upper windows, and watching as Japanese soldiers began moving to encircle their position. This is when Cleto Rodriguez stopped being a reliable soldier and became something else entirely. Act 3. The Assault. Nobody gave Cleto an order. There was no one left to give orders. He saw the situation clearly. His squad was about to be overrun and killed. The only way anyone survived was if someone broke the Japanese defensive positions. He stood up, grabbed his BAR, and started walking toward the nearest Japanese machine gun nest. Not running, walking, firing the BAR from his hip as he moved. The other soldiers in his squad later reported that they thought Cleto had lost his mind. You don't walk into machine gun fire. You don't attack fortified positions alone. It's suicide. But Cleto wasn't thinking about tactics or survival. He was thinking about his squad, his friends, the guys who'd been with him for 3 years. The Japanese machine gunners saw him coming and focused their fire on him. Bullets were hitting the ground around his feet, smacking into walls near his head. He didn't stop. He got within 20 yards of the first machine gun nest, a sandbagged position in a ground floor window, and emptied his magazine into it. All 20 rounds, sustained automatic fire, absolutely devastating at that range. The machine gun went silent. Cleto dropped the empty magazine, reloaded, and kept moving. There was a second machine gun position 15 meters to the right. He turned toward it, firing again, bullets ripping through sandbags and concrete. And then something incredible happened. Another soldier from his squad, Private First Class John N. Reese, Jr., the sergeant's younger brother, saw what Cleto was doing and decided to join him. Reese grabbed grenades and ran forward to support Cleto's assault. The two of them, working together with no coordination and no plan, began systematically destroying the Japanese defensive positions. Cleto would suppress a position with the BAR. Reese would get close enough to throw grenades. Then they'd move to the next position. It was insane. It was reckless. It shouldn't have worked. But it did. Over the next hour, Cleto Rodriguez and John Reese fought their way into and through 3 fortified buildings. They cleared rooms. They killed Japanese soldiers in close-quarters combat. They were wounded. Both of them took shrapnel and bullet grazes. But they didn't stop. The Japanese defenders were experienced, well-armed troops. But they weren't prepared for 2 American soldiers who simply refused to die or retreat. At one point, Cleto's BAR jammed. He cleared it while under fire, bullets hitting the wall inches from his head, and kept fighting. At another point, a Japanese soldier charged him with a bayonet. Cleto killed him at point-blank range. The rest of B Company, seeing what Cleto and Reese were doing, rallied and joined the assault. But Cleto and Reese were always in front, always taking the most dangerous positions. By 210 hours, 3 hours after the assault began, the 3 buildings were secured. The final count, documented in after-action reports. Cleto Rodriguez personally killed 82 Japanese soldiers. John Reese killed an estimated 30 more, 82 confirmed kills, in 3 hours, most of them at close range. The company commander's after-action report described Rodriguez's actions as the most aggressive and determined individual assault I have witnessed in 3 years of combat. Act 4. What came after. Cleto Rodriguez was evacuated to a field hospital that night. He'd been wounded multiple times. Shrapnel in his legs, a bullet graze across his ribs, burns on his hands from the overheated BAR. He spent 2 weeks in the hospital, then returned to his unit. The battle for Manila continued until March 3, 1945. B Company fought through all of it. In April 1945, Cleto Rodriguez was awarded the Medal of Honor. The citation read in part, "He courageously attacked a strongly defended enemy position, repeatedly exposing himself to intense automatic weapons and small arms fire. He killed approximately 82 Japanese. His heroic actions enabled his platoon to continue its advance and complete the capture of the strategic position." John Reese was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross for his actions alongside Rodriguez. The ceremony was held in the Philippines. General Douglas MacArthur personally presented the medal. There were photographs, brief news coverage in American papers, and then everyone moved on. The war in Europe was ending. The atomic bombs were about to be dropped, and there were bigger stories to tell. Cleto Rodriguez went home to San Antonio in late 1945. He was 22 years old, had killed more enemy soldiers in a single engagement than most combat veterans kill in their entire service, and held the highest military honor his country could give. And he went back to work as a janitor. Not because he couldn't find other work. The Medal of Honor came with a lifetime pension, and there were offers. Veterans organizations wanted him for speaking engagements. Some companies offered him jobs based on his fame. But Cleto wasn't interested. He'd done what he felt he needed to do. Now he wanted to live a quiet life. He married his sweetheart, got a small house in San Antonio, and worked various blue-collar jobs for the next 40 years. Janitor, maintenance man, security guard. He almost never talked about the war. When reporters occasionally found him and asked for interviews, he was polite but brief. "I just did my job," he'd say. "Nothing special." In 1990, the Veterans Administration opened a hospital in San Antonio. They named it after Cleto Rodriguez. He attended the dedication ceremony, shook some hands, and went home. He died on December 7, 1990, 49 years to the day after Pearl Harbor. He was 67 years old. His funeral was attended by family, some veterans, and a few local officials. There was a brief mention in the San Antonio newspaper, and then, like his life, it was quiet. Today, most people have never heard of Cleto Rodriguez. His Medal of Honor is on display at the National Museum of the Pacific War in Texas, seen by thousands of visitors who walk past without recognizing the name. The hospital in San Antonio still bears his name, though many people who work there don't know who he was or what he did. Conclusion. So why am I telling you this story? Because Cleto Rodriguez represents something we've forgotten about heroism. He wasn't born special. He didn't have advantages. He didn't seek glory. He was just a poor kid who had every reason to be bitter about life, who could have justifiably done the bare minimum, and no one would have blamed him. Instead, on February 9, 1945, when his friends were about to die, he did something extraordinary. He walked into machine gun fire. He fought for 3 hours straight. He killed 82 enemy soldiers and saved his entire squad. And then he went home and mopped floors for 40 years. No book deals, no movie adaptations, no fame. Just a man who did what needed to be done, then went back to living his life. There's a lesson in that. In a world obsessed with fame and recognition, where everyone wants to be seen and celebrated, Cleto Rodriguez did the most violent, courageous thing imaginable, and then chose obscurity. He didn't need validation. He didn't need the world to know his name. He'd proven something to himself that night in Manila, and that was enough. But we should know his name. We should remember what he did. Not to glorify war. War is terrible, and Cleto would be the first to tell you that. But to remember that heroes don't always look like we expect them to. They're sometimes small, poor, quiet men who work jobs nobody notices, who carry weight nobody sees, who, when the moment comes, are capable of things that defy explanation. Cleto Rodriguez was one of those men, and his story deserves to be told. If you ever find yourself in San Antonio, Texas, There's a VA hospital on the south side of town. Next time you drive past it, look at the name on the sign, and remember the janitor who became a one-man army.